Welcome to another episode of Drawn to Place podcast. This one's a little bit different than what I have been doing. Instead of me being on camera, this is just audio. And let me know in the comments if you're a usual listener, if you prefer just the audio or if you want the video of me as well. I'm good either way. Just trying to work out how I want this podcast to live as it continues to age. But today I want to talk about repetition and how repetition trains attention, not creativity. So we tend to think repetition is the enemy of creativity. We associate it with boredom, routine, stagnation, and doing the same thing because we ran out of ideas. But in practice, repetition does something very different. Repetition doesn't dull attention, it stabilizes it. And once attention stabilizes, something important happens. You start seeing what novelty never gives you time to notice. So today I want to talk about why repetition is the quiet engine behind everything that I do here in Drawn to Place, the philosophy of Drawn to Place, and why the grid, which you can see on Instagram or on TikTok if you follow me there, I use a grid system for kind of getting the philosophy and the repetition down in Drawn to Place. The grid itself is not the end goal. The end goal is noticing, it's spending time with something, it's repetition, which we'll talk about in this episode, and how that repetition exposes so much more, and using the grid as a way to do that. But it only works over time. Why low tech practices, like using analog only, depend on repetition, and why creativity is not something you chase, but it's something that shows up once attention has somewhere steady to land. So if you're new here, I'm Sean. I'm a former architect, an educator, an artist, and I started Drawn to Place as a thesis for my MFA, and it continues to grow here in this public realm, moving it out of the gallery space, and the gallery becomes the world, social media, and accessibility for so many other people, getting outside those white walls. So welcome. The cultural problem that we have is that we overvalue novelty. Modern creative culture is built around novelty. There's new tools, new prompts, new aesthetics, new ideas, and all of that is, most of it, I shouldn't say all of it, but most of it is because in novelty, people will pay money to have that novelty. If you watch ads, if you are in marketing, or you pay attention to marketing and how marketing works, it's around creating this lifestyle or this perception of a lifestyle that is novel to what you have. And they're promising you, if you get this product, if you buy our thing, if you buy this course, then you can have that lifestyle as well. You can have that novelty that you don't have. Hey, that's modern culture is built on that. Even in the way films and TV shows are edited and cut nowadays, they're much faster. It's constantly giving your brain something new to look at, to listen to hear. Watch. Westerns are one of my favorite genres. Watch any old Western, spaghetti Western, or any other Western from the 50s, the 60s. Their fight scenes are extremely quiet. Like it's just the sounds of punches landing. Sometimes not even that, like the scuffle of shoes and the scuffling that is happening during the fight. But you watch fight scenes in modern day Westerns and there's a background score. There's sound that is ramping up your emotion to the scene. Good or bad, I'm not arguing which one way or another for that. I'm just arguing that novelty is something that has become more and more, continues to be in modern culture. Social media, exactly the same way. I mean, you talk to most, or you watch any of the quote unquote marketing, social marketing gurus, they're saying you have to grab attention within 3 seconds. Some are now saying 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. You have to have this hook. You have to have this visual hook. You have to have this auditory hook. You have to have this text hook in order for people to watch your stuff. Okay, novelty is what drives modern culture, or at least a lot of people are trying to say drives it. But research in cognitive science consistently shows that novelty resets attention rather than deepens it. So novel stimuli spike dopamine, but they also fragment focus and reduce perceptual sensitivity over time. This is one of the central concerns raised in Annie Murphy Paul's book, The Extended Mind, which is a fantastic book I highly recommend. It's where she synthesizes decades of research showing that sustained thinking depends on stable external structures, not a constant change. So, in other words, novelty excites the brain, but the repetition trains it. And think about you getting better at something, at anything, whether you've played sports or you want to draw, you want to play guitar, any instrument. If you want to be better at whatever your job is, reading contracts or placing IVs. I mean, it's repetition that makes you better, not the novelty. And that's a blind spot that we rarely acknowledge, is that the novelty excites the brain, but repetition trains it. What repetition actually does is it's not about mastery in the way we usually think of it. It doesn't primarily train skill. It trains discrimination. So when you draw or when you observe, when I'm using the grid, I'm drawing different things. I have a grid of windows that I'm drawing. I have a grid of garage doors. There's other grid systems that I might start doing, but that's how I engage and interact with the world in almost a meditative way, is through drawing. Just because I've been doing that for decades, I really enjoy it. And I have degrees in it. It's something that I enjoy. It also helps to refine my noticing and my ability to design and redesign things, because that's what a lot of my degrees are in, is in design. And I absolutely love design. If you don't have drawing as a way of interacting with the world, I do highly encourage you to start drawing. It doesn't have to be good. You don't have to show it to anybody. But what drawing does, and I've taught drawing to college students, and what I always tell them is drawing forces you to look at something more closely than you've ever looked at it before, and notice things that you've never noticed, even if it's a subject that you think you know really well. It's not because what you're putting down on paper and the finished result is going to be beautiful. That's not what it's about. It's about when you are looking at a garage door, for example. When you just look at a garage door, you think it's a garage door. Okay, I get it. But now you start looking at the patterns, and you start looking at the patterns within the patterns, and you start looking at the type of glazing and where the glazing is, or the trim that's around it, the size of it, how it hits the ground. What does that look like when the top of the door hits the trim at the top of the garage door? Like, there's aspects that you don't normally think about. And you're not a garage door designer, you're not an architect. It's just that you start to notice things. You take a bone or a skull that you want to draw, or a piece of lichen or moss or a tree or a rock. When you start to draw it, you have to look at these details you've never looked at before. That's why I highly encourage drawing, and I highly encourage it to be analog as well, because you don't have an undue. There's a lot of things with analog that I enjoy more than digital. Not that I'm against digital at all, but so when I talk about in these podcasts and in my grid system, I do talk about and show drawing, but it doesn't have to be. If you want to write about it, if you just want to sit with it, that's perfectly fine too. As long as you are spending time with it and really focusing on that subject, which drawing forces you kind of to do. So my little side note caveat about drawing. But back to this spending time with it and how it trains discrimination is when you draw the same subject again and again inside the same grid, something shifts. So we're talking about drawing the same subject within the same parameters. So like the same size, using the same medium, sometimes on the same sheet of paper, something shifts. You stop naming objects, you stop performing, and you stop trying to be interesting. Now you're just focusing on drawing this thing. I'm doing windows, I'm doing garage doors. Now they all look different, but the difference is subtle. And I'm noticing more and more differences as I draw more and more windows and garage doors. And I have 2 degrees in architecture. So if somebody with the amount of windows and garage doors that I've drawn and designed formally, and I'm still noticing changes, there's a lot to notice. And you start to notice the subtle asymmetries, the rhythms, the deviations, the small changes over time. And this aligns with research in perceptual learning, which shows that repeated exposure to similar stimuli increases sensitivity to difference, not sameness. The brain becomes better at detecting variance precisely because the frame stays the same. Think about those little riddles or challenges, visual riddles that you see where it's at first glance, it looks like it's all just repeating the exact same thing, the exact same drawing. And then you have to pick out a difference. A lot of times your brain will immediately find that difference. Look at birds on a wire. They might be lined up almost equidistant from each other. You'll notice one that is a little bit farther, a little bit closer instantly, because your brain gets used to that similar stimuli. It's exposed to it, and then its sensitivity to differences increases. And that's why repetition doesn't flatten experience. It actually sharpens your experience. And the grid system that I developed and I used, it depends on repetition, because the grid by itself doesn't do anything. It's one drawing inside a grid is just an exercise, but the power of it comes from returning to it. Now, because when I make a grid, I make it a fixed size, the proportions are fixed, and the subject is also fixed. I will do it on a single sheet of windows. I have a grid, 99 windows happen to fit on this one sketchbook that I'm doing. And there's another sheet that's all garage doors, and I just set up the standard proportions, because most of them are those standard proportions. Most windows, most garage doors are a standard proportion, so I set up that proportion. So now when that is fixed, the grid removes the usual decision fatigue and cognitive load drops. Your working memory is freed up. So now I don't have the cognitive load of what am I going to draw today? What size should I make it? Do I have to fill up this entire sheet? What medium am I going to use? Where am I going to put it? Which sketchbook do I want to use? All that's already decided. I already know that today I'm doing garage doors. I grab the sketchbook that has the garage door sheet in it. I know how big the garage door is going to be. I already know about how long it's going to take because I've done so many already. I mean, my cognitive load drops tremendously, and now I can focus on what little differences do I see here. Now, over time, the grid becomes less about drawing and more about attentional calibration. You're not asking, what should I make? You're asking, what is actually here? Now, repetition versus habit is very important. This matters a great deal when you're talking about the philosophy of Drawn to Place, which is bringing people closer to and a bit deeper connection to where they are and changing a place into a home and into my home. And then this also, repetition versus habit, and why this matters in the whole philosophy of Drawn to Place, then that translation outside of place into every design, everything that you are doing, you've sharpened this noticing muscle, and you'll notice other things more quickly. But here's what's important about repetition and habit is you have to distinguish repetition from habit, because habit is an automatic behavior. It's something that you do automatically and you don't remember doing it. You don't think about doing it. Making coffee in the morning, I don't really think about doing it. I know exactly how many scoops I need. I know that when I hear a certain sound that the water is hot, that I can pour it into the carafe for the French press. Like, that is all automatic stuff. There's nothing that I'm really paying attention to. And some days I might even forget that I made it. Repetition sensitizes perception. And this is another reason why just sitting and being with something and spending time with it without doing something with your hands can sometimes turn into habit, and you'll forget what you even noticed. That's why I encourage people to draw, even if they don't show it to anybody, even if you think it's ugly. Again, it's not performative. You're not doing a drawing to show to anybody, to make it great, to be an artist. You're doing it strictly as a medium, a way for you to sit with something, notice all these little subtle differences and subtle things that happen within it that you've never noticed before. And you're doing it in a way that it is a repetition, not a habit. Because habit reduces awareness, so tasks can become efficient. A repetition, when paired with attention, does the exact opposite. It slows you down just enough to notice differences inside familiarity. That's why repetition feels boring at first. It's uncomfortable in the middle and revelatory later. It's because you're asking yourself to slow down, but still notice, and don't let it become a habit. We're used to, if we slow down and do something over and over, it becomes a habit. We have to step back from that just a little bit. And most people, when they're doing a repetition like this, they start a sheet of just windows or garage doors or front doors or porches or moss or mushrooms, whatever you choose to do. Most people will quit in the middle because it gets kind of boring. Like, oh, I'm doing another mushroom. It's starting to become habit and you're getting bored. You have to back up a little bit. What am I noticing different about this mushroom that I haven't noticed in other mushrooms? And it's not a failure of creativity, it's a failure of patience. And again, in modern society, novelty is what we're after. We're being pushed into novelty. We're not being pushed into patience. So it's something you have to fight against. So why repetition creates belonging is that, and this part often gets overlooked, is you don't feel connected to a place because you visited it once. You feel connected because you've returned. When you return to a place, whether that place is garage doors in your neighborhood, whether that place is in New Orleans, which I really enjoy, and I feel a connection to New Orleans. I've only been there 3 or 4 times, but it's not because of the times I've been there physically. I return when I read about the history of New Orleans, when I visit the Instagram accounts of places that I've seen before, that I've been there before, when I watch documentaries on it, when I listen to, CDs that I've purchased in New Orleans. I'm returning there mentally. Now, I don't have a connection to the place like I would if I lived there, if I were able to wander around and be with it and be present with it every single day. But that connection isn't because I visited once. I continue to visit it, and you feel that connection. I feel a connection to Main Street, USA, and Disneyland. I've only been there twice, but I'm feeling this connection more and more because in my window grid, I go to Google Earth to Street View, and I'm drawing windows off of Main Street as my window grid in my sketchbook. So if I ever do visit Disneyland and Main Street, I'll walk down, I will notice and see these subtle differences in these windows. And whoever I'm with, I'll probably start pointing out like, oh, come look at this window right here. I drew this one. Notice how this does this, or something that's interesting about it. So I visited it, not physically, but I'm visiting it through my drawing, and I feel a connection to it. It's really interesting how it happens. It's not the intended. I didn't intend for that to happen, but I'm starting to feel that, which is interesting. So the human geographer Yi Fu Tuan describes place as something formed through repeated experience over time, not through intensity or novelty. Space becomes place through familiarity, whether that's you physically being there or like with Google Maps, like I just described. And the same is true with attention. Repetition creates familiarity, it creates trust, it creates orientation, it creates belonging. And that's why these practices don't just change how you draw, they change how you relate to environments, neighborhoods, and even yourself. And the more you do these practices that I present in Drawn to Place and within the philosophy of Drawn to Place, the more you do them, the more you'll notice that even when you're not drawing, you're going to notice subtle differences. Not just in the things that you've drawn either. If you're drawing garage doors, you're going to start notice differences in front doors, differences in porches and roof lines. It's this muscle of noticing and how you can quickly see something that's slightly different or slightly intriguing. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing that I've done for years and years. And now with Drawn to Place, I'm getting it out and trying to educate more and more people on how to do that. It's just really fun for me, and I hope it is for you as well. So here's where creativity actually enters. And this is the paradox, and this is the blind spot that a lot of people see. And as a teacher, I fought against this paradox and trying to convince people as well. And those that slow down enough to listen to what I'm saying and then take these into practice, they see a huge difference in it. Is that when repetition removes the pressure to be creative, creativity becomes inevitable. It's that whole idea of like, I wasn't looking for love and I just found love. It's that similar thing where when you remove that pressure to be creative, you can't go into your studio and say, I'm going to be creative today. You probably won't be. I can almost guarantee you won't be. But if you say, I'm going into my studio and here's what I'm going to do, you do this thing that you've been doing over and over, then you let that expand into more things and your creativity starts to come out of it. So once your attention is stable, patterns suggest themselves, questions emerge organically, insights arrive unannounced. And this mirrors what constraint-based creativity research has shown repeatedly, that originality increases when the problem space is stable and limited. Creativity is not the goal, but it is the byproduct. It comes out of that. If your space is stable, if your space is limited, a lot of times, especially for me, I love having a lot of constraints when I'm asked to design something. Like give me a project that has a lot of constraints. That's where I thrive, because then I can push up against the boundaries of that, and I have to get very creative. It's the same thing as and here comes a shameless plug, Everyday Architecture, which is on TikTok as at Everyday Arch, ARCH, and on Instagram, everydayarchitecture.dtp. On there, I talk about how we can use this noticing in the built world, but in everyday architecture, houses that we all live in. Okay, so, but when you're creative there, and I talk about open plans, so open plans don't work because they lack hierarchy, and they don't tell you where to put the furniture. So there's some open plans that work, but a lot of open plans don't, because people think if I just remove all these walls, that's an open plan, and that's what it is. It's not. There's so much more to an open plan, but there's no parameters on where to put furniture, where is the circulation, that doesn't exist. And so it's hard to be creative in spaces like that. If I give you just a few corners that define an area and it defines the circulation, even though it's an open plan, it works much better. It feels more comfortable, and the architecture and the furniture aren't fighting each other, and the furniture isn't taking on a defensive position. Okay. It's the same with being creative. If you have a problem space that's stable and limited, your creativity will increase. Now, repetition is not something you endure on the way to creativity. You don't have to. Now, you iterate. You should iterate when you're designing something, when you're doing something, when you're trying to get better at something. You iterate over and over and over. You do it, see what you don't like about it, change that, do another one. But repetition isn't something to endure. So don't think that you're like, oh, I have to get through this to get to be creative. Not. That is the work. The repetition is the creativity, and it's how attention learns to stay. It's how perception sharpens, and it's how meaning accumulates. So the grid work, and it works because you keep coming back to it. Low tech, the analog works because you stay with it, and you can see it right next to you doing another analog drawing. There's another one right there. That's one of the other things I don't like about digital, is that a lot of times you just open another file and go, instead of keeping them side by side. But noticing works because you repeat. And over time, something subtle and profound happens. You stop trying to see, and you just start seeing. Now, repetition is extremely important. Repetition within the grid, repetition in choosing one thing and getting better at noticing that thing. And you will start to see that as you notice the one thing, whether it be windows or garage doors or types of trees, shapes of trees, you're going to start noticing more and more things because you're strengthening that. So thank you so much for being here. This is Drawn to Place Podcast. Make sure you are subscribed if you're not already. Send this to somebody who you think needs to hear this, that would really enjoy it. Save it. Also, leave me a comment if this audio version was just enough for you, or if you actually want to see me on the screen too. I don't care either way, but I would like to have some feedback if you don't mind. All right. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.